There's a particular kind of loneliness that comes with power, the kind that builds walls so high that even you forget what it feels like to be touched by something real. Ethan Cross knew that loneliness intimately. He'd built an empire from nothing, climbed over competitors, made decisions that destroyed careers without a second thought. And somewhere along the way, he'd stopped being a man and become a machine. Cold, calculating, untouchable. That's what they called him in the boardrooms, in the business magazines, in the whispered conversations of employees who feared him. The Ruthless Billionaire. And he wore that title like armor until a woman walked into his office carrying a portfolio and wearing a nervous smile. And something in him that he'd thought was dead began to stir. If this story resonates with you, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from, and if you think it was worth your time, consider becoming a member for early access to upcoming stories. Your support means everything. The 63rd floor of the Cross Tower overlooked Manhattan like a throne overlooking a kingdom. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city in glass and steel, a reminder that Ethan owned pieces of it, controlled it, bent it to his will. His office was minimalist, cold, designed to intimidate. Black leather, chrome accents, abstract art that cost more than most people made in a year, but meant nothing. It was a space designed for power, not comfort. Ethan stood at the window, hands in the pockets of his Tom Ford suit, watching the city move below. At 35, he had everything he'd ever wanted, wealth that most couldn't comprehend, influence that reached into every sector, respect born from fear. But respect and fear were close cousins, and he'd learned early that fear was more reliable. People who feared you didn't betray you. They didn't get close enough to hurt you. His assistant's voice came through the intercom, sharp and efficient. "Mr. Cross, Miss Reeves is here for the 3 o'clock pitch meeting." He didn't turn from the window. "Send her in." The door opened with a soft click, and he heard her before he saw her. Light footsteps, a catch of breath, the rustle of papers being adjusted. Nervous. Good. Nervous people were easier to control, easier to negotiate with, easier to dismiss when they inevitably disappointed him. He turned slowly, deliberately, using the moment to establish dominance. It was a technique he'd perfected over years. Let them wait. Let them feel small. Then he saw her, and something unexpected happened. His carefully constructed indifference cracked. Just slightly, just enough for him to notice. She was not what he expected. Late 20s, maybe, with dark auburn hair pulled into a professional bun that didn't quite contain the rebellious waves trying to escape. She wore a simple navy dress, modest but well cut, and carried a leather portfolio against her chest like a shield. But it was her eyes that caught him. Hazel, flecked with gold, and filled with something he rarely saw directed at him. Not fear. Not quite. More like determined nervousness, as if she was afraid, but refusing to show it. "Mr. Cross," she said, and her voice was steadier than he expected. "Thank you for seeing me. I'm Olivia Reeves." He gestured to the chair across from his desk, a deliberately uncomfortable piece designed to keep meetings short. "Miss Reeves, you have 15 minutes. She sat, spine straight, and placed her portfolio on the edge of his desk with careful precision. No wasted movement. Interesting. Ethan took his seat, leaning back in his chair, fingers steepled in front of him. The position of judgment. "I've reviewed your proposal," he said, his voice flat, empty of warmth. "It's ambitious. Unrealistic, but ambitious." Most people would have flinched at that. Most people would have started backpedaling, apologizing, trying to save face. Olivia Reeves did neither. Instead, she met his gaze directly. Ambitious, yes. Unrealistic, I'd argue otherwise. She opened the portfolio and pulled out a series of designs, architectural renderings for what looked like a community arts center. "May I?" He nodded, more curious now than dismissive. She stood and spread the designs across his desk. The Cornerstone Project, an art center in the Bronx serving underprivileged youth. We'd offer free classes in painting, music, dance, creative writing, a safe space for kids who have nowhere else to go. Ethan glanced at the designs. They were good. More than good. Thoughtful, well-planned, detailed. But sentiment didn't build buildings. "The numbers don't work," he said. "Your budget is $50,000 short, your funding sources are questionable, and your projected donor base is optimistic at best. You're asking me to invest in a dream, Miss Reeves. I don't invest in dreams. I invest in returns." Her jaw tightened, just barely. "And what's the return on a child's future, Mr. Cross? What's the market value of keeping a 14-year-old off the streets? How do you calculate the ROI on giving someone hope?" He almost smiled. Almost. It was a good answer. Naive, idealistic, destined to fail in the real world. But good. "You can't," he replied simply. "Which is why projects like this collapse within 2 years. Noble intentions don't pay rent." Her eyes flashed, and he saw it then. Fire. Hidden beneath the professional exterior, beneath the careful politeness, there was fire. "Then help me make it sustainable. You're not just a billionaire, you're a strategist. Everyone knows you can turn failing companies into empires. Help me structure this so it doesn't fail." For a moment, Ethan considered it. Not because he cared about art centers or underprivileged youth, but because he was intrigued by her. By the way she refused to shrink, refused to beg, refused to play the game the way everyone else did. "Why me?" he asked. "There are 100 investors in this city who'd love the publicity of funding a charity project. Why come to the one person who's going to tell you no?" "Because the others would say yes for the wrong reasons," she said quietly. "They'd want their names on the building, want the tax write-off, want to feel good about themselves. But they wouldn't care if it actually worked. You," she paused, choosing her words carefully. "You don't do anything halfway. If you said yes, you'd make sure it succeeded. Because you don't accept failure." He studied her for a long moment. She was right. He didn't accept failure. He also didn't accept anything that didn't serve his interests. "Your 15 minutes are up, Miss Reeves." She gathered her designs, her movements composed, despite what he knew must be disappointment. She didn't argue, didn't plead. She simply nodded. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Cross." She was almost to the door when he spoke. "Come back Thursday, 3 o'clock. Bring revised numbers and a sustainability plan. If you can prove this won't be a money pit, I'll consider it." She turned, and for the first time, she smiled. It was small, cautious, but genuine. "Thank you. I will." When the door closed behind her, Ethan turned back to the window. But the city looked different now. Less like a kingdom, more like a question. And for the first time in years, he wasn't sure of the answer. Olivia Reeves had never been inside a building that expensive before. Everything in Cross Tower whispered wealth, from the marble floors polished to mirror shine to the art installations she was certain cost more than her entire apartment. It was intimidating, designed to be. But she hadn't survived 26 years by being easily intimidated. She'd learned early that the world didn't give you anything. You had to take it, carefully, strategically, and with absolute determination. The elevator ride to the 63rd floor felt like ascending to judgment. She checked her reflection in the polished steel doors, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her dress, adjusting the portfolio under her arm. Her hands were shaking slightly. She hated that. Hated showing weakness, hated the way her body betrayed her nervousness. But this meeting mattered more than any she'd ever had. The Cornerstone Project wasn't just a proposal. It was everything she'd worked toward for 3 years, Every dollar saved, every connection made, every late night spent, perfecting designs and crunching numbers. It was her chance to actually make a difference, to prove that art mattered, that creativity could save lives. She'd seen it save hers. Growing up in foster care, bouncing between homes that ranged from neglectful to actively harmful, art had been her only constant. The sketchbook she kept hidden, the pencils she stole from school, the hours spent drawing worlds that were kinder than the one she lived in. Art had given her purpose when nothing else did, and she wanted to give that to other kids who felt as lost as she once had. But wanting something and achieving it were different things. She needed funding, real funding, and that meant facing Ethan Cross. She'd researched him obsessively, read every article, watched every interview, studied his business model. The man was brilliant, ruthless, and apparently incapable of human emotion. He'd built Cross Industries from a single failing tech startup into a conglomerate worth billions. He bought struggling companies, stripped them down, rebuilt them, and sold them for massive profits. Efficient, calculating, heartless. Exactly the kind of person who'd laugh at a proposal to help children through art classes. Except he hadn't laughed. He'd listened. And more surprisingly, he'd told her to come back. Thursday arrived faster than she expected. She'd spent 3 sleepless nights revising her numbers, building the sustainability plan he'd demanded. She'd called in favors, contacted every potential partner organization, mapped out revenue streams from grants, donations, and small-scale fundraising events. By the time she walked back into Cross Tower, she had a plan that was airtight, or as close as she could make it. This time, when his assistant showed her in, Ethan was already seated at his desk. He looked exactly as he had 3 days ago. Same expensive suit, same cold expression, same unsettling intensity in his dark eyes. But she noticed something she'd missed before. Exhaustion. Subtle, buried beneath the polished exterior. But there. Faint shadows under his eyes, a tightness around his mouth. The man worked too hard. Probably never slept. Probably didn't know how to do anything except work. "Miss Reeves," he said without preamble, "show me what you've got." She spread her revised documents across his desk, walking him through each section. Funding sources diversified to include arts grants, corporate sponsorships, and a partnership with the city's education department. Revenue projections, conservative, but realistic. Operating costs reduced by negotiating with suppliers and using volunteer instructors for the first year. A 3-year plan that showed clear milestones and measurable impact. Ethan listened without interruption, his eyes scanning each page with mechanical precision. She could practically see him calculating, analyzing, finding weaknesses. When she finished, silence filled the room. He leaned back in his chair, regarding her with an expression she couldn't read. "It's better," he said finally. "Still vulnerable in year 2 when grant funding runs out. Your volunteer model isn't sustainable long-term. People burn out. You need paid staff." "I know," she admitted, "but paid staff requires an endowment, which requires major donors, which requires the center to already be successful enough to prove its worth. It's a catch-22. He tapped his fingers on the desk, a rhythmic sound that made her heart race. "What if I funded it? All of it. Building, staff, operations. 5-year commitment." Olivia's breath caught. That was more than she'd dared hope for. "That would be," she started, then stopped herself. "Why?" He raised an eyebrow. "Why what? Why would you do that? You said yourself you don't invest in dreams. You don't care about underprivileged youth. So why offer to fund the entire project?" Something flickered in his expression. Annoyance, maybe. Or something deeper. "Because you're right," he said, his voice colder than before. "I don't do anything halfway. If I'm going to attach my name to this, it will succeed." But there are conditions. Of course there were. Nothing in life was free, especially not from men like Ethan Cross. What conditions? You work for me? Directly. You'll manage the project, but you'll report to me weekly. Every decision, every expense, every hire. I maintain complete oversight. She swallowed. That level of control made her uneasy. She'd envisioned independence, creative freedom. Working under Ethan Cross would mean constant scrutiny, constant judgment. But it also meant the project would actually happen. And that mattered more than her comfort. Okay, she agreed. What else? You move into the building. There's a residential floor for key executives. You'll have an apartment, fully furnished, non-negotiable. If I'm investing millions, I need you accessible 24/7. Her stomach tightened. Living here? In his building? That felt too close, too invasive. I have an apartment, she said carefully. I can be available during business hours and, I said, non-negotiable, he interrupted. His voice was sharp, brooking no argument. This is the deal, Miss Reeves. Full funding, full control, and you work from here. Take it or walk away. Olivia stared at him, trying to read past the cold exterior. This wasn't just about the project. This was about power, about control, about a man who needed to dominate every situation. But beneath that, she sensed something else. Loneliness, maybe. The need to keep people close, but not too close. She should have said no, should have walked away and found another investor, one who wouldn't demand she uproot her life. But she thought about the kids who needed the center, about the drawings she'd made as a child, about the chance to actually save someone the way art had saved her. Okay, she said quietly. I accept. He nodded, as if her answer had never been in doubt. My lawyers will draw up the contracts. You start Monday. Move in this weekend. His assistant will arrange everything. And Miss Reeves, he leaned forward slightly, his dark eyes locking onto hers. Don't make me regret this. She met his gaze, refusing to look away. I won't. When she left his office this time, she felt different. Not triumphant, not relieved. Something more complicated. Like she just made a deal with something dangerous. Something that might give her everything she wanted, but would demand more than she expected in return. In the elevator, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Welcome to Cross Industries. Your apartment is 58B. Keycard will be ready Saturday. Don't be late. Monday. EC. She stared at the message, at those initials. EC. Ethan Cross. A man who controlled everything, trusted nothing, and apparently never slept. And now she'd agreed to let him control her project, her schedule, her life. She told herself it was worth it. Told herself she could handle him, keep professional boundaries, maintain her independence. But deep down, in a place she didn't want to examine too closely, she wondered if maybe she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. Or maybe, just maybe, she'd found the one person who'd actually understand what it meant to fight for something that mattered, even if he'd forgotten how to fight for himself. The apartment was absurd. Olivia stood in the doorway of 58B, her single suitcase feeling pathetically small against the backdrop of floor-to-ceiling windows, designer furniture, and enough square footage to house 3 families. This wasn't an apartment. It was a statement. Money doesn't just buy comfort. It buys isolation. The kind where you can stand in the middle of a room and still feel completely alone. She set her suitcase down and walked through the space slowly. Open concept living area with a kitchen that looked like it had never been used. Bedroom with a king-sized bed and sheets that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown in, and a shower with 6 different nozzle settings. Everything was gray, white, chrome, expensive and empty, just like the man who owned the building. Her phone buzzed, Another text from EC. Settled in? Team meeting tomorrow. 8 a.m. sharp. Don't be late. She typed back a simple yes, then spent the next hour unpacking her meager belongings. 1 suitcase. That's all she'd brought. All she'd needed to bring because she'd learned early not to accumulate things. Things got left behind when you moved, and she'd moved enough times to know better. Even now, with stability and a college degree and a career starting to take shape, she still lived light. Still kept everything she truly valued in one bag. Old habits died hard. That night, she lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. Working for Ethan Cross, living in his building, being accessible 24/7. It felt less like an opportunity and more like being swallowed whole. But she'd made the choice. Now she had to follow through. Monday morning came too fast. Olivia dressed carefully in her most professional outfit, a charcoal pantsuit she'd bought secondhand but had tailored to fit perfectly. Armor. That's what clothing was for her, a way to signal that she belonged, that she was competent, that she deserved to be in rooms with people who had more money and power than she'd ever have. The meeting room on the 62nd floor was already full when she arrived at 7:55. A dozen executives, all men except for one woman in her 50s, all dressed in suits that cost more than Olivia made in a month. They looked at her with varying degrees of curiosity and dismissal. The new pet project, the charity case the boss was funding for reasons no one understood. Ethan entered at exactly 8 o'clock. The room shifted, spines straightened, conversations died, attention focused. He commanded space without trying, his presence filling the room like a pressure system. He took his seat at the head of the table and gestured for everyone else to sit. Let's begin. The meeting was brutal. Ethan dissected each department's quarterly report with surgical precision, asking questions that exposed weaknesses, challenging projections, demanding results. No one was spared. The CFO stumbled over an explanation about overseas investments. The head of acquisitions couldn't justify a failed merger. The VP of operations got torn apart for a supply chain delay. And through it all, Ethan remained cold, clinical, unmoved by excuses or explanations. This was the ruthless billionaire in action, the man who'd built an empire by refusing to accept anything less than perfection. Olivia watched, fascinated and horrified. This was what she'd signed up for. This level of scrutiny, this impossibly high standard, this complete absence of warmth or understanding. When the meeting finally ended 2 hours later, everyone filed out quickly, eager to escape. Olivia gathered her things slower, still processing what she'd witnessed. Miss Reeves. Stay. Ethan's voice cut through the room. She froze, then turned. He was still seated, reviewing something on his tablet, not looking at her. Yes? He finally raised his eyes. That's what you can expect from me. No exceptions. No special treatment, because your project involves children and art. You report to me like everyone else. You deliver results like everyone else. Understood? Understood. Good. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced efficiency. You'll present your first progress report Friday. I want a timeline, contractor bids, staffing plan, and community outreach strategy. 4 days is enough time, he interrupted. If you can't handle the pace, tell me now. I'll find someone who can. She felt anger flare in her chest, hot and defensive. I can handle it. We'll see. He walked past her toward the door, then paused. You did well not speaking during the meeting. People who talk too much usually have nothing worth saying. It took her a moment to realize that was a compliment, or the closest thing to one he was capable of. Thank you, I think. The corner of his mouth twitched. Might have been a smile. Might have been nothing. Get to work, Miss Reeves. The next 4 days were hell. Olivia worked 16-hour days, calling contractors, negotiating bids, drafting staffing plans, creating outreach strategies. She barely slept, barely ate, barely left her apartment except to grab coffee from the building's cafe. The project consumed her, but she'd handled worse. Foster care had taught her to work harder than everyone else, to prove she was worth keeping around. And even though she wasn't in the system anymore, the instinct remained. Prove your worth. Don't give them a reason to discard you. By Friday morning, she had everything Ethan had demanded. Timeline? Check. Contractor bids? 3 competitive options. Staffing plan. Detailed job descriptions and salary ranges. Outreach strategy? Partnerships with 12 local schools. She walked into his office at 3 o'clock, the appointed time, and laid it all on his desk. He didn't look up. I'm reviewing the Patterson merger. Give me the summary. She stood there, portfolio in hand, and condensed 4 days of work into 3 minutes. Building permits filed, contractor selected. First phase begins in 6 weeks. 3 full-time staff positions posted. Interviews starting next week. Community partnerships established with local schools. First informational meeting scheduled for parents. Budget tracking system implemented. We're on schedule. Ethan finally looked up. His eyes scanned her face, taking in details she wished he wouldn't notice. The exhaustion, the stress, the determination. Sit down, Miss Reeves. You look like you're about to collapse. I'm fine. Sit. Down. She sat, more from surprise than obedience. He stood and walked to a cabinet, pulling out a bottle of water and handing it to her. Drink. When's the last time you ate? This morning. Liar. His voice was flat, matter of fact. Your hands are shaking. You have shadows under your eyes. You're running yourself into the ground. I told you I need results, not a martyr. I'm getting you results, she shot back, anger bleeding into her voice. Isn't that what matters? He studied her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted. Just slightly. Just enough for her to see past the cold exterior to something more complicated underneath. Results matter, he said quietly. But sustainable results require sustainable workers. If you burn out in a month, the project fails. And I don't accept failure. So eat, sleep, take care of yourself. Consider it a direct order. She blinked, thrown off balance. Was he showing concern or just protecting his investment? With Ethan Cross, it was impossible to tell. Order whatever you want from the building restaurant, he continued, pulling a black credit card from his wallet and sliding it across the desk. Corporate account. Use it. I can pay for my own food. I'm sure you can. But you won't. You'll work through meals and tell yourself you don't have time. So I'm making it easy. Order food. Eat it. That's not negotiable either. She picked up the card slowly, feeling like she was accepting more than just meal privileges. Like every small thing he gave her was another thread in a web she didn't fully understand yet. Thank you. He returned to his desk, already refocusing on his work. Dismissed. But as she reached the door, he spoke again. Miss Reeves. She turned. You did good work. She felt something warm bloom in her chest. Pride, maybe. Or something more dangerous. Thank you, Mr. Cross. Call me Ethan. We're going to be working closely. Might as well drop the formalities. Ethan, she repeated, testing the name. It felt intimate, personal. Too personal for what this was. Then call me Olivia. He nodded once. Olivia. Now go eat something before you pass out in my hallway. Back in her apartment, Olivia collapsed on the couch, the corporate credit card still in her hand. She should have felt triumphant. She'd passed his test, earned his approval, proven she could handle the pressure. But instead, she felt unsettled, because the ruthless billionaire had just shown her something unexpected. Care. Hidden beneath layers of control and cold efficiency, Ethan Cross had noticed she wasn't taking care of herself. And he'd done something about it, which meant he was paying attention. Really paying attention. and that terrified her more than his ruthlessness ever could. 3 weeks into working for Ethan Cross, Olivia had developed a routine. Wake at 6, coffee at 6:30, emails by 7, in the office by 8. Meetings, contractor calls, budget reviews, staffing interviews. Work until 7 or 8 at night, sometimes later. Order food with the corporate card he'd given her, though she still felt guilty every time. Fall into bed, exhausted. Repeat. The Cornerstone project was coming together faster than she dared hope. The building permits had cleared. Contractors had broken ground. She'd hired 2 staff members, both excellent, both passionate about arts education. Everything was on schedule, on budget, exactly as Ethan demanded. But something else was happening. Something she hadn't anticipated. She was starting to see him, the real him. Not the ruthless billionaire persona he showed the world, but the man underneath. Small glimpses, brief moments when the mask slipped, like the way he always asked if she'd eaten before late meetings, or how he'd started having coffee delivered to her office every morning, exactly how she liked it, even though she'd never told him her preference. He'd noticed. He always noticed. Or the afternoon she'd found him in the building's small library, a room she hadn't known existed, reading a worn paperback. Poetry. Neruda. He'd looked almost embarrassed when she walked in, quickly closing the book and returning to his usual cold efficiency. But she'd seen it. The man who read poetry in stolen moments. Or the time she'd worked late, past midnight, and found him still in his office, staring at the city lights, with an expression so profoundly lonely it made her chest ache. He'd heard her approach and immediately shuddered the vulnerability, replacing it with sharp professionalism. But she'd seen it. The man who stood at the window and wondered if any of it meant anything. These glimpses were dangerous, because they made her curious, made her want to know more, made her forget that he was her boss, that this was professional, that she couldn't afford to see him as anything other than the man who controlled her project's future. It was late Thursday when everything shifted. Olivia was in the project office they'd set up on the 40th floor, reviewing architectural plans, when her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Hello? Is this Olivia Reeves? Yes. Who's this? This is Mercy Hospital. We have a girl here, Maria Santos, age 15. She listed you as an emergency contact. Olivia's heart dropped. Maria. One of the kids from the pilot program they'd started, a preliminary outreach to test interest before the center officially opened. Bright, talented, living in a group home. They'd connected immediately, 2 foster kids who understood what it meant to survive. What happened? She's okay, the nurse said quickly. Minor injuries. But there was an incident at her group home. Police are involved. She's asking for you. I'll be right there. Olivia grabbed her coat and ran. She didn't think about protocol, about asking permission, about the fact that leaving mid-project review was exactly the kind of thing Ethan would disapprove of. A 15-year-old girl needed her. Nothing else mattered. She was halfway to the elevator when she heard his voice. Where are you going? She turned. Ethan stood in his office doorway, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He'd been working late, as always. Emergency, she said, not stopping. I have to go. What kind of emergency? One of the kids from the pilot program. She's in the hospital. Olivia reached the elevator and jabbed the button repeatedly, as if that would make it come faster. Ethan walked toward her, his long stride eating the distance between them. I'll drive you. No need. I can. My driver is faster. And you're too upset to navigate city traffic safely. The elevator arrived. Olivia stepped in, and after a moment's hesitation, so did Ethan. They rode down in silence, the air thick with unspoken tension. His driver was waiting outside, a black Mercedes that probably cost more than the entire project budget. Ethan opened the door for her, then climbed in after, giving the driver the hospital address. "I could have taken a cab," Olivia said, her voice tight with worry. "You could have, but you didn't have to." She looked at him, really looked at him. His expression was carefully neutral, but his presence was solid, grounding. He didn't ask questions, didn't demand explanations, just came. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Because you clearly care about this girl," he said simply. "And people who care that much shouldn't face things alone." Something in her chest cracked, just a little. At the hospital, they found Maria in the ER, sitting on a bed with a bandaged arm and a split lip. When she saw Olivia, her tough exterior crumbled. Olivia rushed to her, pulling the girl into a careful hug. Hey, I'm here. You're okay." Maria clung to her, tears soaking into Olivia's shirt. "He hit me. My foster dad. I broke a plate and he just, No. I know, sweetheart. You don't have to go back there, I promise." Ethan stood back, giving them space, but Olivia could feel his presence, watchful, protective. When Maria finally pulled back, wiping her eyes, she noticed him for the first time. "Who's that?" "That's my boss," Olivia said. "Ethan Cross." She paused, not sure how to explain why a billionaire was in a hospital ER at 10 p.m. "He gave me a ride." Ethan stepped forward, and Olivia braced herself for awkwardness. Men like him didn't know how to talk to traumatized foster kids. But then he crouched down, putting himself at Maria's eye level, and spoke in a voice Olivia had never heard from him before. Soft, gentle, real. "You're safe now," he said. "Whatever happened, wherever you've been, that's done. Olivia won't let anything happen to you. And neither will I." Maria studied him with the suspicious wariness of a kid who'd learned not to trust adults. "Promise?" "I promise. And I don't make promises I can't keep." Something in Maria's posture relaxed. "Okay." A social worker arrived shortly after, a harried woman with kind eyes and too much paperwork. Olivia spent the next hour navigating bureaucracy, making calls, pulling strings. She found Maria a bed in a better group home, one she'd personally vetted, made sure the police report was filed properly, ensured that the abusive foster father would face consequences. Ethan watched it all without comment. But he stayed. Never left. Never checked his phone or acted impatient. Just stood there, solid and present, like an anchor in chaos. When everything was finally settled, and Maria had been transferred to the new placement, Olivia finally allowed herself to feel the exhaustion. They walked back to the car in silence. Ethan opened the door for her again, and she slid into the leather seat, suddenly aware of how much tonight had cost her, emotionally, physically. The drive back was quiet. Olivia stared out the window, watching the city blur past, trying to compose herself. "You didn't have to stay," she said finally. "I know. But you needed someone there, even if you didn't realize it." She turned to look at him. His profile was sharp in the passing streetlights, all angles and shadows. "How did you know what to say to her?" He was quiet for a long moment. "When I was 8, my father left, just walked out. My mother worked 3 jobs to keep us fed. I spent a lot of time alone, a lot of time scared, a lot of time wondering if anyone actually gave a damn." He glanced at her. "So I recognize the look in a kid's eyes when they're waiting for the next adult to disappoint them." Olivia felt something shift in her chest. This was the real wound, the source of his ruthlessness, his need for control, his inability to let people close. He'd been abandoned, left to survive, and he'd built walls so high that no one could ever leave him again, because no one could get close enough to matter. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be. It made me who I am." He turned back to the window. Whether that's good or bad is still up for debate. They arrived back at Cross Tower. Ethan walked her to the residential elevator, and for a moment, they stood there, the night stretching between them. "Thank you," Olivia said, "for driving me, for staying, for," she hesitated, "for understanding." He looked at her, and for once, his eyes weren't cold. They were warm, searching, almost vulnerable. "You care about those kids," he said. "Really care. Not because it looks good or feels noble, but because you understand what they're going through." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "That's rare," he continued. "Most people who do charity work do it from a distance. Safe. Clinical. But you're in it. Really in it." "I was one of those kids," she admitted. "Foster care until I aged out at 18. No family, no safety net. Art was the only thing that kept me alive." Understanding flickered in his eyes. "That's why the project matters so much. It's not just a job, it's personal. Very personal." Silence fell between them, but it wasn't empty. It was full of recognition, of shared understanding, of two people who'd survived childhood by building walls and were now standing close enough to glimpse what was on the other side. "I should go," Olivia said, even though part of her didn't want to. "It's late." "Olivia," she stopped, her name on his lips sounding different than it ever had. "Yes? I'm glad you called me by my first name tonight, even if it was by accident." She realized she had. At some point in the chaos, he'd stopped being Mr. Cross and become Ethan. "Good night, Ethan. Good night, Olivia." She rode the elevator alone, but something had changed. A door had opened, just slightly, just enough to let light through. And she wasn't sure if that terrified her, or if it was exactly what she'd been waiting for all along. The next morning, Olivia woke to find a text waiting. Not from Ethan's usual curt corporate messages, but something different. "How's Maria?" The fact that he'd asked, that he'd thought about it, that he cared enough to follow up, made something warm unfurl in her chest. "She's okay. Settled in the new place. Thank you again for last night." His response came quickly. "Good. Take the morning. You've earned it." She stared at the message, surprised. Ethan Cross didn't give time off, didn't believe in breaks or slack. But maybe the man she'd seen last night was more than just the ruthless machine everyone feared. Maybe there were layers she was only beginning to understand. She used the morning to visit Maria, bringing books and art supplies. The girl was wary but grateful, still processing the trauma but safe. On her way back to Cross Tower, Olivia found herself thinking about what Ethan had shared. His father leaving, his mother working 3 jobs. The loneliness. It recontextualized everything. The control, the ruthlessness, the walls. He wasn't cruel by nature, he was protected. So armored that nothing could hurt him, because nothing could reach him. Joa understood that, had built similar walls herself. When she returned to the office that afternoon, she found Ethan in a meeting with the acquisitions team, his voice sharp as he dissected someone's failed negotiation. Back to the Ruthless Billionaire. The mask firmly in place. But now she knew it was a mask, and that changed everything. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. In public, at meetings, during business hours, Ethan remained cold and professional. Demanding, exacting, impossible to please. But in private, in stolen moments, he was different. He'd stop by her office late at night with coffee. Not corporate coffee. The good stuff from a place in Brooklyn he'd apparently researched, because she'd mentioned once that she missed the cafe near her old apartment. He'd ask about Maria, about the other kids in the pilot program, and he'd listen, really listen, in a way that made her feel seen. He'd started leaving books on her desk, never with notes, just books he thought she'd like. Poetry, novels, philosophy, always perfectly chosen. Always exactly what she needed to read at that moment. And once, late on a Friday when everyone else had gone home, she'd found him playing piano in the executive lounge. Badly. His fingers stumbling over keys, frustration evident in every missed note. She'd stood in the doorway, watching, until he noticed her. "I didn't know you played," she said. "I don't," he replied, flexing his fingers with clear annoyance. "I'm trying to learn." Badly. "Why?" He shrugged, a gesture that seemed too casual for a man who calculated everything. "You talk about music like it matters, like it's essential. I wanted to understand what you hear." Her heart did something complicated in her chest. He was trying to understand her world, the creative, emotional world he'd shut himself off from. "Want help?" she offered. "I used to play. Not well, but better than whatever you're doing." The corner of his mouth twitched. "That's a low bar." She sat beside him on the piano bench, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Show me what you're trying to play." He demonstrated a simple melody, or what should have been simple. His fingers were too tense, his timing off. Everything about his approach was wrong. "You're thinking too much," she said. "Music isn't about control, it's about feeling. I don't do feelings." She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth he was trying to hide. "Yes, you do. You just pretend you don't." His jaw tightened. "Olivia, it's safer that way," he said quietly. "Safer. But lonely." He didn't respond, just stared at the keys like they held answers to questions he couldn't ask. She placed her hand over his, guiding his fingers to the correct position. "Like this. Relax. Let the music move through you instead of trying to force it." They played together, her hand on his, a simple melody that filled the empty lounge with something that felt dangerously like intimacy. When the last note faded, neither of them moved. "You should go," Olivia whispered, even though she didn't want to. The air between them felt electric, charged with possibility and danger. "Stay," Ethan said. Then, softer, "Please." That single word, that plea, undid something in her. Because men like Ethan Cross didn't say please, didn't ask, didn't show vulnerability. But he just had. For her. She stayed. They talked for hours, about childhood, about survival, about the things they'd built to protect themselves, and whether those protections had become prisons. Ethan told her about his mother's death when he was 19, how he'd built his company partly to prove his father wrong, how success had given him everything except the one thing he'd actually wanted, which was to not feel so completely alone. Olivia told him about foster care, about the homes where she wasn't wanted, where she was just a check from the state, about aging out of the system with nothing and no one, about how art had saved her but also isolated her, because creating beauty meant admitting you believed in something beyond survival. "I thought I was fine alone," Ethan said eventually. "Convinced myself I preferred it. Control is easier when no one gets close." "And now?" Olivia asked, her voice barely audible. "Now I'm not sure." He looked at her, and in his eyes, she saw something she'd never expected to see. Fear. Not of failure or loss or vulnerability. Fear of wanting something he didn't know how to have. "Olivia," he started, then stopped, shook his head. "Never mind." "Say it," she urged. "Whatever it is." "I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, the words rough like they'd been dragged out of him. "You're supposed to be an employee, a project, something I control and manage. But you're not. You're," he struggled for words. "You're real. And I haven't let anything real get close to me in 15 years. She should have said this was a bad idea. Should have established boundaries, maintained professionalism. Should have protected herself. But she'd spent 26 years being careful, being safe, keeping everyone at a distance. And she was tired of it. I think about you too, she whispered. All the time, even when I know I shouldn't. His hand came up slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His fingers traced her jaw, gentle despite their size, reverent despite his usual roughness. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. How to be with someone, how to let someone in. We'll figure it out, she said. Together. He leaned in, slowly, carefully, and kissed her. It was gentle at first, tentative, like he was afraid she'd disappear. But then she kissed him back, and something in him broke open. His hand slid into her hair, pulling her closer, and the kiss deepened into something desperate, something that tasted like years of loneliness finally breaking apart. When they finally pulled back, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. This is a terrible idea, he said. Probably, she agreed. I'm your boss. I know. You work for me. I know. And yet I can't. He stopped, his voice breaking slightly. I can't let you go. Then don't, she said simply. They stayed like that for a long moment, foreheads touching, breathing the same air, letting the reality of what had just shifted between them sink in. Everything was different now. Complicated. Dangerous. Perfect. I need to tell you something, Olivia said eventually, pulling back slightly. Something you should know before this goes any further. Ethan's eyes searched hers, concern flickering in their depths. What? She took a breath, gathering courage. I've never. She paused, feeling vulnerable in a way she hadn't in years. I'm 26, and I've never been with anyone. Not like that. Understanding dawned in his expression. You're a virgin, she finished, hating how clinical the words sounded. I know it's unusual. I know people assume things. But she struggled to explain. I never found anyone I trusted enough. Never felt safe enough. Every relationship I tried ended before it got that far, because I couldn't. She stopped. Because you couldn't let them close, Ethan finished quietly. His hand came up to cup her face. Because you've been protecting yourself, just like I have. She nodded, tears pricking her eyes. I understand if that changes things. If you don't want, he kissed her, soft and certain, and full of something that felt dangerously like promise. I want, he said against her lips. God, Olivia, I want. But only when you're ready. Only when you trust me enough. Only when it's right. She felt something in her chest crack wide open. Because this man, this ruthless billionaire everyone feared, was offering her exactly what she'd always needed. Patience, safety, understanding. How did I get so lucky? She whispered. He smiled, a real smile, rare and beautiful. I'm the lucky one. Trust me. They spent the rest of the night talking, kissing, discovering each other slowly. No rush, no pressure. Just two people who'd spent their lives alone, finally finding someone who understood what that loneliness felt like. When Olivia finally returned to her apartment at 3 a.m., she felt different. Changed. Not because anything physical had happened, but because something emotional had. She'd let someone in. Really in. For the first time in her entire life. And instead of fear, all she felt was hope. Dating your boss was complicated. Dating Ethan Cross was impossible. They tried to keep it professional. Maintained distance in meetings, avoided touching in public spaces, never referenced their relationship during work hours. But the secret created its own kind of intimacy. Stolen glances across conference rooms, text messages late at night, his hand brushing hers when no one was looking. The project was thriving. The building was ahead of schedule, staff was hired, community outreach had exceeded every projection. On paper, everything was perfect. In reality, Olivia was falling for a man who still had walls she hadn't even begun to scale. Because while Ethan had opened up that night at the piano, there were parts of himself he still kept locked away. Rooms in his psyche she wasn't allowed to enter, and she could feel them. The way he'd shut down when conversations got too deep. The way he'd deflect with work whenever emotions got too intense. The way he'd pull away just when she thought they were getting closer. It was the third week of them being whatever they were when things came to a head. They were in his apartment, one floor above hers, a space she'd never been invited to before. It was exactly like him. Expensive, minimalist, cold. No personal photos, no warmth, just steel and glass and emptiness. "You live like a hotel guest," she said, walking through the space, "like you're ready to leave at any moment." He was at the bar, pouring expensive scotch into crystal glasses. "Maybe I am." Olivia turned to face him. "Why? Why keep everything at a distance? Even here, in your own home?" "Because homes don't last," he said simply, handing her a glass. "People leave. Places change. The only thing you can count on is yourself." She set the glass down untouched. "I'm not leaving. You don't know that." "I do." He smiled, but it was sad. Everyone says that. And everyone eventually realizes I'm not worth staying for. "Who hurt you?" she asked quietly. "Besides your father. Besides a dozen failed attempts at relationships." He laughed, bitter. "Pick a trauma, Olivia. Dead mother, absent father. Every girlfriend who realized that dating the ruthless billionaire sounds romantic until you meet the actual man. Cold, obsessive, incapable of real connection." He drank his scotch in one swallow. "I'm good at business. I'm terrible at people." "You're not terrible," she said, walking toward him. "You're scared. There's a difference. Same result." "No. Scared people can learn. You just haven't found the right teacher." She took the empty glass from his hand and set it aside. "Let me teach you." "Like you taught me piano?" he asked, a hint of warmth returning to his voice. "Exactly like that." She kissed him, slow and deep, and felt him respond. His hands came to her waist, pulling her closer, and for a moment everything was perfect. Then his phone rang. He pulled away, checking the screen. "I have to take this." "Of course you do," she said, trying not to sound disappointed. "It's the Singapore deal. I've been negotiating for months. It's almost midnight, Ethan. It's 7 a.m. there. Business doesn't sleep." He answered the phone, his voice immediately shifting to corporate mode. Sharp, focused, completely present for whoever was on the other end. Olivia watched him pace, gesturing with one hand, discussing terms and conditions and contracts, completely in his element, completely unavailable. She left quietly. He didn't notice. Back in her apartment, Olivia sat on the couch and let herself feel the frustration building. This was the pattern. They'd get close, really close, and then something would pull him away. Work, usually, but sometimes just his own fear. She understood fear. She lived with it daily. Fear that she wasn't enough, that she'd be abandoned again, that caring for someone would end with her alone. But she was trying to fight through it. Ethan wasn't. He was letting fear win, letting it control him, dictate his choices, keep him isolated. Her phone buzzed. "Sorry. Had to take that." "Come back?" She stared at the message, wanted to say yes, wanted to go back upstairs and pretend everything was fine. But that wasn't healthy. That was enabling. "No," she typed. "I need space tonight." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Okay. She didn't sleep well. Kept reaching for her phone, wanting to text him, wanting to bridge the gap. But space was necessary, for both of them. The next morning, she found him waiting outside her apartment door. He looked terrible. Rumpled suit, no tie, hair disheveled. Dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept at all. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "Last night. The call. leaving you alone. I'm sorry. You're always sorry, Olivia said gently, but you keep doing it. I know. Then stop. Olivia. She held up a hand. I care about you. So much it scares me. But I can't be with someone who's only half present, who shuts down every time things get real, who chooses work over connection every single time. He flinched like she'd struck him. I don't know how to change that. Then learn, she said firmly. Because I'm not asking you to be perfect. I'm asking you to try, to actually show up, to let me in instead of keeping me at arm's length. Can you do that? He looked at her with something raw in his expression. Vulnerability, fear, determination all mixed together. I don't know, he admitted. But I want to. For you. Not for me, she corrected. For us. And for yourself. Because you deserve more than this empty life you've built. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to her face. Teach me, he said quietly. Like the piano. Show me how to do this. She leaned into his touch. It's going to be hard. Good. Nothing worth having is easy. That afternoon, things shifted. Ethan cleared his schedule. Actually cleared it. No calls, no meetings, no emergencies. Just them. They spent the day together, not doing anything grand or romantic, just existing in the same space. They walked through Central Park, sat by the lake, talked about everything and nothing. He told her about his first failed business, about the years of struggle before success, about the fear that he'd end up like his father, absent and irrelevant. She told him about the foster home where she'd been happiest, about the family who'd almost adopted her, but changed their minds at the last minute, about the day she aged out of the system with $300 in a backpack. They shared wounds, not to bond over trauma, but to understand where each other's scars came from. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and amber, Ethan took her hand. I'm going to mess this up, he said. Probably multiple times. I'm going to work too much and shut down when I should open up. I'm going to be difficult and stubborn and impossible. I know, Olivia said, but I'm going to be scared and insecure and probably push you away when I'm feeling vulnerable. I know that too. So we'll mess it up together, he said, and figure it out as we go. She smiled. Together. They kissed as the sun disappeared below the skyline, and for the first time since they'd started this, Olivia felt like maybe it would actually work. Not because it would be easy, but because they were both willing to try. Later that night, back in his apartment, they lay on the couch together, not doing anything, just being. Olivia's head on his chest, his hand in her hair. The silence was comfortable. Safe. I haven't felt this in years, Ethan said quietly. What? He was quiet for a moment. Peace. She lifted her head to look at him. His eyes were soft, vulnerable, open. Me neither, she admitted. They fell asleep like that, tangled together. Two people who'd survived by being alone, learning how to survive together instead. It wasn't perfect. They still fought, still had moments where old patterns emerged. But they were trying, really trying. And slowly, carefully, they were building something real, something that might actually last. Because love, Olivia realized, wasn't about finding someone perfect. It was about finding someone willing to grow alongside you, someone who saw your wounds and didn't run, someone who understood that healing wasn't linear, wasn't easy, wasn't guaranteed, but was worth fighting for anyway. The Cornerstone project officially opened on a Wednesday in October. The building gleamed in the autumn sunlight, all glass and possibility. Inside, classrooms full of art supplies waited for their first students. Music rooms with donated instruments. Dance studios with mirrors and ballet bars. A theater space for the creative writing program. Everything Olivia had dreamed of, brought to life. She stood in the center of the main gallery, barely able to believe it was real. 3 months ago, this had been just drawings and hope. Now it was concrete and paint and potential. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Ethan. She'd know his stride anywhere now. "What do you think?" she asked without turning. "I think," he said, coming to stand beside her, "you built something extraordinary." "We built it," she corrected. "You wrote the checks. I made the vision real." She turned to him. "This is yours as much as mine." His expression was complicated, proud, but also something else, something uncertain. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." "Ethan, tell me." He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. A gesture she'd learned meant he was uncomfortable. "The opening is in 3 hours. Press, donors, politicians, everyone's going to be here." "I know. And they're all going to ask about us." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He gestured between them. "This. Us. We haven't exactly been subtle. People are talking." Her stomach dropped. "Is that a problem?" He was quiet. Too quiet. "You're ashamed," she said slowly. "Of me. Of us." "No, that's not." His voice was sharp, defensive. "Then what is it?" He turned away, walking toward the windows. "I've built a reputation. The ruthless billionaire who doesn't get attached, doesn't get distracted, doesn't mix business with anything personal. If people know about us, it changes things. Changes your reputation, you mean? Makes you look weak? I didn't say that. You didn't have to." Olivia felt anger rising in her chest, hot and defensive and hurt. "So what? We just pretend? Keep hiding? Act like professionals while everyone gossips?" "I'm trying to protect you," he said, turning back. "From what? From being associated with me? From being seen as the billionaire's charity case? Because that's what they'll say, that you're sleeping with your boss for money, for advancement, for all the wrong reasons. And you care what they think?" "Yes." He said it simply. "Honestly, I do. Because once your reputation is damaged, you can't rebuild it. I learned that the hard way." She stared at him, feeling something crack in her chest. "This isn't about reputation. This is about fear. You're scared of commitment, scared of being seen with me publicly, scared of admitting that you actually care about someone. That's not fair." "It's completely fair," she shot back. "Every time we get close, you find a reason to pull away. Work, reputation, fear of judgment. It's always something. Always an excuse to not be fully present." "Olivia." "No." She shook her head, tears threatening. "I won't do this. I won't be someone's secret. Someone you're willing to be with behind closed doors, but won't acknowledge in daylight. I deserve better than that." "You do," he admitted quietly. "You deserve better than me." "And there it is," she said bitterly. "The self-loathing. The belief that you're not worth loving publicly. That you have to hide anything good because you don't deserve it. That's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying, Ethan? Be clear. For once in your life, just be honest." He looked at her, and she saw it. The fear. Raw and visceral. Terrified of being seen, of being vulnerable, of admitting he needed someone. "I'm saying I don't know how to do this," he said, his voice breaking slightly. "How to be with someone publicly. How to let people see that I'm not just the ruthless machine. I've spent 15 years building walls, and you're asking me to tear them all down in front of everyone." "I'm not asking you to tear them down," Olivia said, her voice softening despite her anger. "I'm asking you to let me in, completely. Not halfway. Not when it's convenient. All the way." Silence filled the gallery, heavy and thick. Finally, Ethan spoke. "What if I can't?" "Then we can't do this," she said quietly. "Because I've spent my whole life being someone's secret, someone's burden, someone's afterthought. And I'm done. I won't be that for you, no matter how much I care about you." Oh, flinched. "So that's it? You're giving me an ultimatum?" I'm giving you a choice, she corrected. Be with me, really be with me, or let me go. But stop keeping me in this in-between space where I'm good enough in private, but not in public. She walked past him toward the exit, tears finally falling. The opening is in 3 hours. Figure out what you want before then. She left him standing alone in the gallery they'd built together, surrounded by everything they'd created and nothing that mattered. Back in her apartment, Olivia let herself cry. Angry tears, hurt tears, frustrated tears. Because she loved him, completely. And watching him sabotage something good because of fear was breaking her heart. Her phone buzzed. Once, twice, 10 times. Messages from Ethan. I'm sorry. Please come back. I need you. Talk to me. She didn't respond. Let him sit with it. Let him actually feel the consequence of his choices. 2 hours before the opening, there was a knock on her door. She knew it was him, considered not answering. But curiosity won. She opened the door. Ethan stood there, still disheveled, holding something. A canvas. He'd painted something. Badly. Terribly. With absolutely no skill. But he'd tried. It was abstract, messy, full of dark colors that somehow conveyed loneliness, pain, and desperate hope all at once. I've never painted before, he said. I'm terrible at it. I can see that. But you told me once that art is about feeling, not skill. About expressing something you can't say with words. She waited. I can't tell you I'm not scared, he continued. I can't promise I won't mess this up or struggle with being public or want to hide sometimes. I'm too damaged for easy promises. Then why are you here? Because I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you. He held out the canvas. I choose you. Publicly, privately, every way that matters. I choose us. She took the painting, looking at it properly. In the chaos of colors, she could see it. The attempt at vulnerability, the effort to express emotion through art, his gesture toward her world. It's terrible, she said. Absolutely awful. I know. I love it. She set it aside and pulled him into her apartment. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tight. I'm sorry, he whispered into her hair, for being afraid, for hiding, for not giving you what you deserve. You're giving it to me now, she said. That's what matters. They held each other for a long time. When they finally pulled apart, Olivia checked the time. We have an hour. Better get ready. Together? He asked. Together, she confirmed. They arrived at the opening holding hands, and when the press asked about them, Ethan didn't deflect, didn't dodge. He looked at Olivia and said simply, She's the reason for all of this. My partner in every way that matters. It wasn't a grand declaration, wasn't dramatic or particularly romantic, but it was real, public, honest, and that was enough. The opening was a success by every measure. Press coverage was overwhelmingly positive. Donors committed to long-term funding. Politicians promised support. And most importantly, the kids showed up. Dozens of them, curious and cautious, testing the space to see if it was real, if they were truly welcome. Olivia spent the evening moving between groups, talking to parents, introducing staff, watching as children touched instruments tentatively, picked up paintbrushes hesitantly, stepped into dance studios carefully, each one looking for permission to believe this was for them. Ethan stayed close, but gave her space to shine. She'd catch glimpses of him talking to donors, shaking hands, playing the billionaire philanthropist role perfectly. But every so often, their eyes would meet across the room and he'd smile. Small, private, just for her. It changed how people looked at them, not with judgment, but with curiosity. The ruthless billionaire and the foster kid who'd built something beautiful together. It made for good press, but more importantly, it felt true. Later, When the crowd thinned and exhaustion set in, they found themselves alone in the music room. Olivia sat at the piano, playing the melody Ethan had been struggling with months ago. He leaned against the wall, watching. "You got good at that," he said. "Had a good teacher. Who, if I remember correctly, was incredibly patient with my complete lack of talent." She smiled. "Patience is a virtue." "So I'm told." He pushed off the wall and came to sit beside her on the bench, exactly as they had that first night. "Play something for me. What do you want to hear?" "Something that shows me what you're feeling." She thought for a moment, then began playing. A piece by Debussy, Clair de Lune, slow, haunting, full of emotion that words couldn't capture. As her fingers moved over the keys, she felt Ethan's hand come to rest on her lower back. Warm, solid, present. When the last note faded, silence filled the room. "That was beautiful," he said quietly. "That's how I feel when I'm with you," she admitted, "like everything's finally clear." He turned her face toward him gently. "I've never been good at expressing this kind of thing. Words or feelings or any of it. But I need you to know something." She waited. "I love you." The words landed between them, simple and profound. Olivia felt her breath catch. "You've never said that before." "I know. I was afraid to. Afraid it would make everything too real, too permanent, too vulnerable. But then I realized that's exactly the point." She kissed him softly. "I love you too." They sat there, foreheads touching, letting the weight and wonder of those words settle into reality. "This is terrifying," he admitted. "Good terrifying or bad terrifying?" "Good. Definitely good. But still terrifying." She pulled back to look at him. "Why?" "Because now I have something to lose. Now there's a future I can imagine that includes someone other than myself. And the idea of losing that, losing you," he stopped. "It's the scariest thing I've ever faced." "You're not going to lose me," she said firmly. "Not unless you push me away. And even then, I'm stubborn. I'd probably fight to stay." He smiled. "I'm counting on that stubbornness." They kissed again, deeper this time, full of promise and passion and possibility. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan spoke quietly. "I want you." She understood what he was asking, what he was offering. Her heart raced. "I want you too. But I know." He cupped her face gently. "I know you've never been with anyone. I know that's important, sacred. And I want you to know that whenever you're ready, if you're ever ready, I'll be patient. There's no pressure, no expectations. Just us, moving at whatever pace feels right." Tears pricked her eyes. "How did I find you?" "Lucky, I guess," he said. "Though I'd argue I'm the lucky one." They left the center together, fingers intertwined. Back at Cross Tower, they stood in the hallway between their apartments. "Yours or mine?" Ethan asked. She thought about it. The weight of the question, the intimacy it implied. "Mine," she said. "But just to sleep. I'm exhausted." He nodded. "Just to sleep." They fell into her bed, fully clothed, wrapped around each other, and slept more soundly than either had in years. In the morning, Olivia woke to find Ethan already awake, watching her. "That's not creepy at all," she mumbled, still half asleep. "I'm memorizing you," he said simply. "What you look like first thing in the morning. How peaceful you are when you sleep. I want to remember this." She stretched, cat-like. "Remember what?" "The moment I realized I could actually have this." "Have you? Have us. Be happy." She propped herself up on one elbow. "And are you? Happy?" He considered the question seriously. "More than I've ever been." "Good." She kissed him. "Because I am too." They spent the morning in comfortable domesticity, coffee in her small kitchen, sharing sections of the newspaper, trading sections of newspaper. his feet in her lap as they sat on the couch. Small touches that spoke of intimacy and comfort. "This is nice," Ethan said at one point. "This. Us. Being normal." "We're not normal," Olivia laughed. "You're a billionaire. I run a nonprofit. We live in a tower that costs more per month than most people make in a year." "Fair point. But this feels normal. Feels like home." She looked at him. "You've never used that word before." "Home." "What?" He seemed surprised by his own admission. "I haven't had one. Not since my mother died. Everywhere I've lived has been temporary. Nice, expensive, but temporary. And now? Now I'm starting to think home isn't a place. It's a person." She felt that familiar warmth bloom in her chest. "You're getting good at the romantic declarations. Practice." He pulled her closer. "I figure if I'm going to do this relationship thing, might as well do it right. You're doing great." He kissed the top of her head, and they sat like that for a while, wrapped in each other and possibility. Later that week, things began shifting in ways Olivia hadn't anticipated. The center was operating at full capacity. More kids showed up daily. The staff was overwhelmed but thriving. Community support exceeded every expectation. But with success came scrutiny. A journalist from a major paper requested an interview, not about the center, but about her relationship with Ethan. The angle was clear from the email. Billionaire's charity case girlfriend. The modern Cinderella story. All the implications that she'd used her position, her vulnerability, her past, to secure funding and a wealthy boyfriend. Olivia showed Ethan the email. "How do you want to handle this?" he asked. "Honestly, I want to tell them to fuck off, but that's probably not strategic." He smiled. "Probably not. We could ignore it. They'll write the story anyway. Better to control the narrative." "You want to do the interview?" "Only if we do it together." She considered. "That would make it official. Public. No going back." "There's already no going back," he said quietly. "Not for me. Is there for you?" She looked at him, at the man who'd terrified her months ago, who'd shown her patience and vulnerability and love, who'd painted her a terrible painting because he couldn't find words, who'd changed his entire life because she'd asked him to try. "No," she said. "There's no going back." They did the interview together, sat side by side in the center's gallery, and answered questions honestly about how they met, how the relationship developed, how they navigated the power dynamic, how they balanced professional and personal. The journalist was skeptical. As Miss Reeves, some might say you leveraged your personal relationship to secure funding, that you dated your way into success. Olivia felt Ethan tense beside her, but she answered before he could. Some might say that. And those people would be revealing their own biases. The assumption that a woman couldn't secure funding based on the merit of her proposal, that she must have used her body, her sexuality, her romantic availability. It's reductive and frankly misogynistic. And you, Mr. Cross, why fund a project from someone you were romantically interested in? Doesn't that show favoritism? "I funded the project because it was excellent," Ethan said firmly. "The proposal was thorough, well-researched, and addressed a real community need. My personal feelings for Miss Reeves developed afterward, and separately. If anything, I held the project to higher standards because of our relationship, not lower." The journalist pressed harder. "But surely you can see how it looks. Rich man, poor woman, boss, employee. The power imbalance is significant." Olivia leaned forward. "The power imbalance exists in every relationship. Rich, poor, male, female, employer, employee. The question isn't whether imbalance exists, it's how you navigate it. Ethan and I are equals. We challenge each other, support each other, hold each other accountable. That's what healthy relationships look like, regardless of bank accounts. The article that came out was fair, not glowing, but honest. It acknowledged the complexity, the questions, the scrutiny, but it also showed them as real people navigating something genuine. The response was mixed. Some people saw a love story. Others saw opportunism. But Olivia realized she didn't care. Let people think what they wanted. She knew the truth. And so did Ethan. That was enough. 3 months after the center opened, winter settled over the city. Snow fell softly outside the tower windows as Olivia worked late in her office, reviewing applications for a spring expansion program. Everything was thriving beyond expectations, which meant more work, more responsibility, more hours. She didn't mind. This was purpose. This mattered. A knock interrupted her focus. Ethan stood in the doorway, 2 cups of hot chocolate in hand. "From the place in Brooklyn you like." She smiled, accepting the cup. "You're getting soft." "Maybe." He sat across from her desk, and she noticed something different in his expression. Nervous, maybe. Uncertain. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I want to talk to you about something." She set down her pen, giving him full attention. "Okay." He took a breath. "Move in with me." She blinked. "What?" "My apartment. Move in. Officially. Not just sleeping over sometimes. Actually living together." Her heart raced. "That's a big step." "I know. Is it too soon? Am I pushing?" She thought about it. They'd been together for 6 months, known each other for almost a year. It felt fast, but also completely natural. "No," she said slowly. "It's not too soon." "But why now?" He looked at her seriously. "Because every morning I wake up in your bed. I don't want to leave. Every night you're not there, the apartment feels empty. I spent 35 years alone, and I was fine with it. Now I've tasted what not being alone feels like, and I can't go back." She felt tears prick her eyes. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said." He reached across the desk for her hand. "So is that a yes?" She squeezed his fingers. "Yes. It's a yes." They moved her things over the weekend. She didn't have much, still carried that foster kid mentality of traveling light. But Ethan made space for her anyway. Cleared closets, moved furniture, bought extra bookshelves for her growing collection. Made his cold, minimalist apartment into their home. The first night in their shared space felt significant. They cooked dinner together, badly, laughing as they burned pasta and oversalted sauce. Ate on the couch because the dining table felt too formal. Fell asleep watching terrible reality TV because Olivia insisted he needed to experience normal people entertainment. In the darkness, wrapped around each other, Ethan spoke quietly. "Thank you." "For what?" "For making this feel like home. For being patient with me. For not giving up when I was difficult." "You were impossible, not just difficult," she teased. "Still am sometimes." "Yes, but you're my impossible." He kissed her. "And you're my stubborn." They fit. Together like that. Complementary opposites. His control and her creativity. His logic and her emotion. His walls and her determination to scale them. It wasn't always easy. They fought about work-life balance regularly, about his tendency to disappear into deals, and her tendency to take on too much, about boundaries and communication, and all the messy human things neither of them was naturally good at. But they fought fair, with love, with the understanding that they were on the same team. It was late February when everything shifted again. They were in bed, the city glittering outside floor-to-ceiling windows, when Olivia spoke quietly. "Ethan." He was half asleep, one arm around her waist. "I think I'm ready." He came fully awake. For what? She turned to face him, and he saw it in her eyes. Understanding dawned slowly, then completely. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "I've never been more sure of anything." He cupped her face gently. "There's no pressure. no timeline. I meant what I said about patience. I know, but I don't want to wait anymore. I trust you. Completely. The way he looked at her then, Olivia knew she'd made the right choice. Not because of desire, though that was there, but because of the reverence in his expression, like she was offering him something sacred. "Tell me what you need," he said quietly. "Tell me how to make this good for you." She kissed him. "Just be patient and honest. Tell me if I need to slow down or stop, or I will. I promise." They moved slowly, carefully, with more attention and care than Olivia had ever experienced. Ethan took his time, checking in constantly, making sure every touch was wanted, every moment comfortable. There was pain, some, but also tenderness, and patience, and love so evident it made her want to cry. When it was over, they lay tangled together, both breathing hard, both changed. "Are you okay?" he asked, his hand stroking her hair gently. "More than okay." "That was," she paused. "Perfect. It wasn't perfect. I hurt you, a little, but you were so careful, so present." So, she searched for the right word. "Loving." He pulled her closer. "Thank you for trusting me with that, for trusting me with you." She lifted her head to look at him. "Thank you for being worth trusting." They stayed awake for hours after, talking quietly, about fear and vulnerability and the strange intimacy of letting someone know you completely, about how terrifying and wonderful it was to give yourself to another person fully. "I never understood what the big deal was," Olivia said eventually. "Why people made such a fuss about sex. But now I get it. It's not just physical. It's," she gestured vaguely, "everything. Emotional, mental, spiritual. It's giving someone access to all of you, every part. That's why it matters who you choose," Ethan said. "Why trust is essential. Why I'm so honored you chose me." "I'll always choose you," she said simply. "Good. Because I'll always choose you back." They fell asleep like that, wrapped around each other. 2. People who'd survived by being alone, learning how to be completely together. In the morning, something felt different. Not worse, not better. Just different. Like a door had opened that couldn't be closed. Like they'd crossed a threshold into deeper territory. Ethan noticed it too. She could tell by the way he looked at her over coffee, like he was memorizing her again. "What?" she asked. "Just thinking?" "About what?" "About how much my life has changed in a year. How different I am now. Is that good or bad?" He smiled. "Very good. Surprisingly good. Terrifyingly good." She walked around the counter and wrapped her arms around him from behind. "I love you." "I love you too," he said, his hands covering hers. "More than I thought I could love anyone." They stood like that for a long moment, and Olivia felt complete. Not because she needed him to be whole, but because choosing each other, continuously and consciously, made everything better. Made the world feel less lonely. Made survival feel like living. Spring came to New York with aggressive optimism. The city bloomed despite itself. Flowers pushing through concrete, trees greening along avenues, people emerging from winter hibernation with renewed energy. The Cornerstone Project celebrated its 6-month anniversary. The numbers were extraordinary. Over 200 kids enrolled, 3 successful art exhibitions, a student-written play performed to a sold-out audience, scholarship offers for gifted students, measurable improvement in school attendance and grades. Everything Olivia had dreamed of, multiplied. But success brought new challenges. The board wanted to expand, open centers in other boroughs, maybe other cities. Scale the model, prove it could be replicated. It was a board meeting that changed everything. Olivia sat at the head of the conference table, presenting expansion plans, when one of the donors, an older man named Richard Harrison, interrupted. "Miss Reeves, This is all very impressive. But let's address the elephant in the room. She paused. I'm sorry. Your relationship with Mr. Cross. While we appreciate his financial support, there are concerns about the optics, about whether this organization can be taken seriously when its founder is romantically involved with its primary benefactor. The room went silent. Olivia felt anger rise in her chest, but before she could respond, Ethan spoke. He'd been sitting quietly in the back, letting her lead, as he always did in these meetings. Mr. Harrison, Ethan's voice was ice. Are you suggesting that Miss Reeves's achievements are somehow invalidated by our personal relationship? I'm suggesting that appearances matter, that credibility requires professional distance. Then you're suggesting that successful women can't also have personal relationships, that we should hold female leaders to different standards than male ones. No one questions male CEOs who marry their assistants or date employees. But a woman secures funding through merit and suddenly she's suspect. Ethan stood, buttoning his jacket. If this board cannot evaluate Miss Reeves based on her results, her leadership, and her vision without reducing her to my girlfriend, then perhaps this board needs new members. I'll be happy to facilitate those replacements, Harrison sputtered. Mr. Cross, I didn't mean, I know exactly what you meant. Ethan's voice was sharp, and I'm telling you it's unacceptable. Miss Reeves has built something extraordinary. The fact that I love her doesn't diminish that. It doesn't diminish her. And if anyone in this room thinks otherwise, the door is behind you. Silence. Then, slowly, other board members began nodding, voices of agreement, support for Olivia, for her work, for her right to be both professionally successful and personally fulfilled. Harrison backed down, muttered apologies. The meeting continued. But afterward, when everyone had left, Olivia found Ethan in the hallway. That was, she started. Necessary, he finished. I'm not going to let anyone diminish what you've built. Not on my watch. She kissed him. Thank you for standing up for me, even though I could have handled it myself. I know you could have, but you shouldn't have to. Not alone. They walked back to the tower together, and Olivia felt something settle in her chest. This was partnership. Real partnership. Not him saving her or her fixing him. Just two people choosing to face things together. That night, Ethan was quieter than usual. They'd cooked dinner, cleaned up, settled on the couch to read. But she could feel his mind elsewhere. What's wrong? She asked, setting her book aside. Nothing's wrong. Ethan. He closed his laptop and turned to face her. I've been thinking about something. Okay. Us. Specifically, our future. Her heart raced. What about it? He took her hand. I want to marry you. The words hung in the air. Simple, direct, completely sincere. Olivia felt her breath catch. That's not a proposal, he continued quickly. That's a declaration of intent. I want to propose properly. Romance and planning and all the things you deserve. But I needed you to know where my head is, where my heart is. Tears filled her eyes. When did you decide this? I've known for months. But tonight, watching you lead that meeting, seeing you stand in your power, while also letting me support you, it crystallized. I want that. Forever. Not just cohabitation or dating. Marriage, partnership, building a life together officially. She kissed him. Long and deep and full of promise. I want that too. Yeah? Yeah. He smiled. That rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. Good. Because I already bought a ring. Her eyes widened. You did? Months ago. He stood and walked to his study, returning with a small velvet box. I was waiting for the right moment. But apparently, I can't keep secrets from you. He opened the box. Inside was a ring. Not ostentatious. Not the kind of massive diamond a billionaire might be expected to buy. Instead, it was delicate. A vintage Art Deco design with a small but perfect stone surrounded by intricate metalwork. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I had it designed based on your drawings." He pulled out his phone, showing her sketches she'd made months ago. Geometric patterns, Art Nouveau influences. He'd somehow incorporated all of it into the ring. "You were paying attention." "Always." "So is this a proposal?" she asked, smiling through tears. "Not yet." "Remember, I want to do it properly," she laughed. "You just showed me the ring and asked me to marry you. How much more properly do you need to do it?" "Let me have this. Let me plan something romantic." "Okay. But for the record, my answer is yes." He kissed her forehead. "Good to know." 2 weeks later, he proposed properly. At the center, in the gallery where they'd first fought about going public. He'd filled it with her art, pieces she'd created over the years, sketches from foster care, paintings from college, recent work, all displayed like she was a real artist, not just an administrator. In the center of the gallery stood an easel with a blank canvas and a note. "Paint our future." She looked at him, confused. "I wanted to give you something permanent," he explained. "Something we create together, a literal representation of our life. So paint it, however you see it." She picked up the brush, laughing. "I can't paint under pressure. I'll help." They painted together. Messy, chaotic, full of laughter and color and terrible artistic choices. It was awful, absolutely hideous, and perfect. When they finished, covered in paint and breathless from laughter, Ethan knelt. It wasn't polished, wasn't perfectly planned. But it was real. "Olivia Reeves," he said, "you walked into my office a year ago with a proposal and changed my entire life. You taught me that walls aren't protection, they're prisons. That ruthlessness isn't strength, it's fear. That being alone isn't safety, it's just lonely." He pulled out the ring. "I love you. I love your stubbornness, your passion, your fierce determination to make the world better. I love how you see beauty everywhere and refuse to let anyone dim that vision. I love who I am when I'm with you. So will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life showing you exactly how big my love can be?" She was crying openly now. "Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and she pulled him up to kiss her. They held each other in that gallery, surrounded by their terrible painting and her life's work, and it felt like everything had come full circle. Two people who'd been told they were too much, not enough, too damaged, too broken, finding each other, choosing each other, building something beautiful from all that pain. They were married 3 months later. Small ceremony. Close friends, essential family. The kids from the center. Nothing extravagant. Nothing designed to impress. Just real. The wedding took place in the center's theater. Olivia wore a simple dress, cream-colored, with lace sleeves, nothing like the elaborate gowns society expected. Ethan wore a suit, charcoal gray, his usual armor softened by the way he looked at her as she walked down the aisle. Maria, now 16 and thriving, stood as Olivia's bridesmaid. She'd grown in the past year, more confident, more secure. Proof that the center worked, that love and support could actually heal. Olivia's vows were written on a piece of paper she pulled from her pocket, hands shaking slightly. "Ethan, a year ago you terrified me. This ruthless billionaire who controlled everything, trusted nothing, let no one close. I thought you were impossible." She smiled. "I was right. You are impossible. Impossible to predict, impossible to control, impossible to stop loving once I started. You taught me that strength isn't about walls. It's about choosing to be vulnerable despite fear. That power isn't about control. It's about trust. That love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone willing to grow alongside you, to face fears together, to build something real despite every instinct to protect yourself. She paused, tears threatening. You gave me a home, not a place, but a person. Someone who sees all of me, the broken parts and the beautiful parts, and chooses me anyway. So I promise you this. I'll choose you every day, in easy moments and difficult ones. It terrified me. This ruthless billionaire who controlled everything, trusted nothing, let no one close. I thought you were impossible. She smiled. I was right. You are impossible. Impossible to predict. Impossible to control. Impossible to stop loving once I started. You taught me that strength isn't about walls. It's about choosing to be vulnerable despite fear. That power isn't about control. It's about trust. That love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone willing to grow alongside you, to face fears together, to build something real despite every instinct to protect yourself. She paused, tears threatening. You gave me a home, not a place, but a person. Someone who sees all of me, the broken parts and the beautiful parts, and chooses me anyway. So I promise you this. I'll choose you every day, in easy moments and difficult ones. When you're being impossible and when you're being perfect. I'll love you ruthlessly, completely, with everything I am. Because you deserve that. And so do I. Ethan's eyes were wet as he spoke his vows. He didn't have paper. Spoke from memory, from heart. Olivia, I spent 35 years alone. Not lonely, I told myself. Just alone. Self-sufficient. Safe. Then you walked into my office with your portfolio, and your nervous smile, and your absolute refusal to back down, and everything I'd built to protect myself started crumbling. I fought it. God, did I fight it. Tried to keep you at a distance, tried to maintain control, tried to convince myself this was temporary. But you wouldn't let me. You pushed and challenged and demanded I show up, really show up. Not as the ruthless billionaire, as Ethan. Just Ethan. Messy, damaged, scared Ethan who didn't know how to love someone. He wiped his eyes. You taught me. Patiently, persistently, with a stubbornness that probably saved my life. You taught me that letting someone in isn't weakness, that needing someone doesn't make you less, that love isn't about control or power or protection. It's about choice, choosing someone, being chosen, building something together that neither of you could build alone. So I promise you this, I'll show up every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I'll choose vulnerability over walls, connection over control, us over fear. I'll love you with everything I am, the ruthless parts and the gentle parts, the strong parts and the broken parts. All of me, forever. When they kissed, sealing vows, the room erupted in applause. But Olivia barely heard it, lost in him, in this moment, in the reality of forever. The reception was exactly what they'd wanted. Good food, better music, dancing until their feet hurt. At one point, Olivia found herself watching Ethan with the kids from the center. He'd learned to relax around them. Wasn't awkward anymore. Just genuine. A girl named Sophie, 8 years old, had attached herself to him, declared him her favorite adult. Now she was showing him her latest painting, and he was listening with complete attention, treating her art seriously, asking real questions. "This is extraordinary, Sophie," he said, crouching to her level. "The way you've used color here, it creates such emotion." "Do you feel that when you're painting?" Sophie nodded enthusiastically. "It makes me happy." "Then that's the most important thing." Olivia felt her heart expand watching them. This man who'd been so closed off, so controlled, now completely present for a child. Later, they danced. Not gracefully. Ethan wasn't naturally coordinated, but they moved together, and that was enough. "I love you, Mrs. Cross," he said against her ear. "I love you too, Mr. Cross, though I'm keeping my name." "Of course you are. I'd expect nothing less." She pulled back to look at him. "You know what this means, right?" "What?" "Now you're stuck with me. Forever. No escape." He smiled. "Sounds perfect." Their honeymoon was 2 weeks in Italy. Not luxury resorts or tourist traps. Small towns, local food, art museums. They rented a villa in Tuscany and spent days doing nothing. Reading, painting, making love, cooking terrible meals, and ordering pizza when they inevitably failed. One afternoon, lying in bed with sunlight streaming through open windows, Olivia traced patterns on Ethan's chest. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "How different life is now. Different good or different bad? Different perfect. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, for reality to intrude. Nothing this good lasts forever." "It does if you protect it," he said. "If you choose it daily. If you don't take it for granted." She propped herself up on one elbow. "When did you get so wise?" "When I married someone who wouldn't let me stay stupid." They laughed, kissed, tangled together in sheets and sunlight and possibility. Back in New York, reality did intrude. Work, responsibilities, the constant demands of running an organization. But they handled it together. Developed rhythms and routines. Morning coffee together before the chaos. Wednesday date nights, non-negotiable. Sundays for rest, just the two of them. They fought sometimes, about work-life balance still, about his tendency to disappear into deals, about her tendency to take on too much responsibility. But they fought fair, with love, with the commitment to resolve rather than win, and they made up thoroughly. 6 months into marriage, Olivia found Ethan in his study late one night. He was staring at financial projections, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. "Talk to me," she said, leaning against the doorframe. "About what?" "Whatever's bothering you." He sighed, rubbing his eyes. "I've been thinking about legacy, what I want to leave behind." "Okay." And I realized, all this, he gestured to the documents, the empire, the wealth, none of it matters. Not really. She walked over and sat on the edge of his desk. "Then what does? You. What we've built together. The center. The kids whose lives we've changed. That's legacy. That's what matters." She smiled. "Look at you. Getting all philosophical. I learned from the best." She kissed him. "So what are you going to do about it?" He pulled her into his lap. "I want to expand, not just the center. Everything. Use the wealth for actual good. Build more programs, fund more creators, support more communities, make a real difference." "I'm in," she said immediately. "Whatever you need." "Together." He kissed her neck. Together. They sat like that for a while, planning futures, building dreams, imagining possibilities. Two people who'd started as opponents became partners, transformed into something neither had imagined possible. Love that was ruthless in its honesty, complete in its acceptance, big enough to embrace every part of both of them, and growing still. A year into marriage, Olivia discovered she was pregnant. She stood in the bathroom of their apartment, staring at the test, feeling a complex mix of emotions: joy, terror, wonder, fear, all tangled together. She found Ethan in the kitchen, making coffee. He took one look at her face and set down the mug. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. I'm just..." She held up the test. "We're going to have a baby." Time stopped. Ethan stared at the test, then at her, then back at the test. His expression cycled through shock, disbelief, wonder, and finally settled on something that looked like awe. "We're He started. "We're going to be parents." She nodded, tears already falling. "I know we didn't plan this. I know it's soon and complicated and maybe terrible timing with the expansion and—" He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms. "It's perfect." "You think so?" "I know so." He pulled back to look at her face, cupping it gently. "We're going to have a child, someone who's half you and half me, someone we get to love and raise and teach. How is that anything other than perfect?" The pregnancy was smooth, but emotionally intense. Olivia struggled with fear. Fear that she'd be a terrible mother because she'd never had a good example. Fear that she'd repeat cycles of abandonment and instability. Fear that she wouldn't know how to love a child properly. Ethan struggled too. Fear that he'd be absent like his father. Fear that he'd pass on his emotional unavailability. Fear that ruthlessness in business would bleed into parenting. They attended therapy together, worked through trauma and fear, learned that acknowledging pain didn't mean repeating it, that choosing differently, consciously, was how cycles broke. The center thrived throughout. Her pregnancy. Maria graduated high school with honors and a full scholarship to art school. Sophie's paintings were featured in a gallery. Dozens of other kids flourished. Evidence that love and support actually worked. Proof that what they'd built mattered. Their daughter was born on a Tuesday in October. 7 pounds, dark hair, perfect. They named her Elena, after Ethan's mother, after the woman who'd worked 3 jobs and taught him that love meant showing up, even when exhausted. The first night in the hospital, Ethan held Elena with terrified reverence. "She's so small," he whispered. "What if I break her?" "You won't," Olivia assured him. "You're gentle when it matters. But I don't know how to do this, how to be a father. None of us do it first. We learn. Together." He looked at his daughter, this tiny human who was half him and half Olivia, and something in him cracked open. A final wall, the last defense, crumbling. "I promise you," he said to Elena, even though she couldn't understand. "I promise I'll show up. I'll be present. I'll love you even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I'll do better than my father did. I'll be the father you deserve." Olivia watched him, tears streaming down her face. "And I promise you," she said to Elena, "I'll give you stability, security, a home that stays. I'll love you fiercely. I'll teach you to be strong and gentle, to take up space, to refuse to shrink for anyone, to be ruthlessly yourself." Elena yawned. Tiny, perfect, unaware of the promises being made. Parenthood was harder than either expected. Sleepless nights, constant worry, the weight of responsibility, but also moments of pure magic. Elena's first smile, her laugh, the way she'd grasp Ethan's finger with her whole hand, the way she'd fall asleep on Olivia's chest, completely trusting. They learned together, made mistakes, apologized to each other, supported each other through exhaustion and frustration and overwhelming love. The center expanded to 3 locations. The model worked, could be replicated. Other cities wanted to partner. Everything they dreamed of, manifesting. One night, when Elena was 6 months old, Olivia found Ethan standing over her crib, just watching. "You okay?" she whispered, not wanting to wake the baby. He turned, and his expression was soft, vulnerable in ways he'd only learned to be with her. "I was just thinking." "About what?" "About how much has changed. 3 years ago I was alone, convinced that was how life would always be. And now," he gestured to Elena, to Olivia, to their life. "Now I have everything." She came to stand beside him, slipping her hand into his. "We have everything." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For pushing me to be better. for showing me that walls aren't protection, for loving me ruthlessly." She smiled. That's what you do for people you love. You love them ruthlessly, completely, big enough to hold all their parts. They stood there together, watching their daughter sleep, and Olivia thought about the journey. From that first terrified pitch meeting to this moment. From lonely and isolated to surrounded by love. From surviving to thriving. She thought about Lucas's story, the script she'd heard in the center's audio room, about loneliness and acceptance, and finding someone whose love was big enough. It was her story, too. Was everyone's story, maybe. The search for someone who could embrace you completely. The courage to let them try. Years later, they'd tell Elena about how they met, about the Cornerstone Project, and the ruthless billionaire who learned to be gentle, about walls and vulnerability and choosing love despite fear. They'd teach her that being too much wasn't a flaw, that taking up space was okay, that the right people wouldn't ask her to shrink, and Elena would grow up surrounded by art and music and love, would see her parents choose each other daily, would learn that happily ever after wasn't a destination but a practice, a commitment to show up, be present, love ruthlessly. Olivia stood with Ethan, their daughter sleeping peacefully, their life full and complex and real, and understood something fundamental. She'd spent 26 years untouched by real love, not because she couldn't find it, but because she was waiting for someone whose heart was big enough to hold all of her. Someone who wouldn't shrink from her intensity or ask her to be smaller. Someone who was strong enough to be vulnerable, powerful enough to be gentle, ruthless enough to love completely. She'd found him, and together, they'd built something more beautiful than either had imagined possible. Not despite their wounds, but because of them. Not by hiding their scars, but by letting them show. Not by being perfect, but by being real. And that, Olivia realized, was what redemption really meant. Not changing who you were, but finding someone who loved exactly who you were, and building something beautiful from that truth. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from, and if you felt it was worth your time, consider becoming a member for early access to upcoming stories. Your support makes all the difference and helps us continue creating stories that remind us all that we're not too much. We just haven't yet found someone big enough to love us completely.